Okay, Lynn, thank you very much for having joined us today for this series, which is in fact the interviews of those persons who have given their life to the cause of peace. And you are one of the leading lights in Minneapolis. My first question would be about your background. So, if you could kindly give us a brief background of your academic and personal life.
All right. Well, it's no mystery. I'm an old guy. I've been around a long time. I'm going on 94 years old. I was born in Thief River Falls, a little town way up near the Canadian border, and was there just a short time, and then we moved to Duluth. So we spent my early days in Duluth, Minnesota, and then we moved to Minneapolis, went to the schools out south Minneapolis. I was at Sanford Junior High School, and then Washburn High is where I graduated in June of 1939, and then went on to the university. I wanted to get a business degree. This was very important to me, and I found out that the only way I could really do that was to join a group like the Navy V7 program, which allowed me to finish my college. So I got a degree there from the university in business. I met my sweetheart and future bride in 1942 at the university. That was Donna Elling, and she was a nurse in training. We fell in love, we got engaged, and I had to go into the Navy combat training every summer. I would go on a cruise with a battleship or a cruiser or aircraft carrier as part of my training. But I was allowed to finish my college, which was very important to me. And in June of '43, I went to Columbia University to take my combat Navy training. Donna and I agreed, we got engaged, and we agreed that as soon as I got my commission, we would get married, because we were told we'd have maybe a 4-day leave before we went into combat. So in November of 1943, I graduated, got my commission, came home, and this beautiful gal that I'd met at the university and dearly loved, we were able to get married, and we had only a 4-day leave, and that was a marvelous experience. And then I kissed her goodbye, didn't see her for 2 years. So I was in the South Pacific, involved in many different campaigns, none on the battlefield. We were always kind of somehow on the sideline watching the action, because they turned our LST into a supply ship. So this was great news to me, because we were not going to be in the battle. And this is incredible, because we witnessed the horrors of warfare full time, particularly at Tarawa, where this was maybe the focal point of the entire battle between the United States and Japan, because they were going to hold that no matter what. And they've refortified that place so that it was practically impregnable. But the Navy, with their superior ability to bomb and strafe, and the LSTs, which I was on, that were in battle, were able to finally overcome the Japanese. But they fought right to the bitter end. They just, nobody, we were told, was taken prisoner. They were all killed. And when we got there as a supply ship, about 2 months after the battle. The carnage was very visible and present and unbelievable, because the bodies were up and down the beach. They didn't bury anybody. They left them there, and there were now skeletons, most of them. And my sailors would go out and pick up souvenirs, and so I got imbued with the idea that warfare is something that, if the human family can come to their senses, and if there ever were a need today for peace and tranquility in the world, as we see what happens every day, even now, and maybe more so than ever before, has the human family been fighting. And over there is a picture of, maybe I could get Dick to pick that up, and I want to say a minute or say something about that spaceship Earth we're traveling on, because this, in talking to young people, and that's our hope, I try to convince them that we're traveling on this beautiful spaceship, and we're, at this very moment, we're going 18.5 miles a second as we spin around the sun. So we're passengers on this spaceship. And if we think of it in that way, we would never tolerate what's going on. We would say, this is wrong for somebody down in that part of our spaceship to be killing each other in the name of religion or in the name of a different color skin. So that if we get young people, and that's what Gandhi said, that if we're ever going to have peace in the world, we've got to start with the children. It's not going to happen otherwise. The politicians, mostly men, have been calling the shots and still do. And so we're passengers on board this spaceship, and I would contend that we've got to find a way to abolish warfare and strengthen the United Nations, like Dr. Schwartzberg outlines for us. So that's really the essence of, maybe I've gone on too long, but that's what I want to say with all the effort I can.
So, till now we have talked about your participation in World War II, but I can see later on you participated in Korean War as well. Is that correct?
Yes, but during the Korean War, I was a very, very successful businessman, making tons of money. I was good at sales, I was good at marketing, and I was making all kinds of money. And I never dreamed that I would be called up again from the Navy. But the Navy, one day I came home from Donna, this home, and she said, honey, there's a letter that came in from the State Department. And so I opened it, and I'm ordered to go back into the Navy. And I thought, oh, you know, here we had 2 girls, and one of them was still in diapers. But I had to go back in the Korean War, and I was assigned to an LST in Astoria, Oregon, out on the coast of the West Coast. And we took the family, Don and I and the 2 girls, we drove out. I reported in, and there we were at the rainiest place in North America. It rained every day. But there were 7 LSTs out in the harbor, and mine was one of them. And the admiral there said, we've got to paint the LSTs even if it's raining, and that's what we did. I had the crew. I was the executive officer, that's the number 2 officer, and the navigator. And we painted the ships in the rain. We got them active. And to make a long story short, we went up to Bremerton, got guns. We went to San Diego. Donna came by car with the kids. And then I finally kissed her goodbye, and we headed for Korea. 7 LSTs. And they were rusted buckets some were not able to cross the Atlantic or the Pacific Ocean to go to Korea, but that was the orders. 7 of us took off. We got as far as Hawaii. One day out of Hawaii, our main reduction gear was growling, and the sailor said, "We got a problem." And we pulled into Pearl Harbor. The Navy inspector came aboard and said, "This ship isn't going anyplace. You're going to stay here and have to be repaired." I said, "What a shame," with a smile on my face, because the other 6 kept going to Korea, and we never got in that battle. They turned our ship into a rest and recreation vessel, and I got Donna to come out, and we had a beautiful apartment on Waikiki Beach. So that was my wartime story for Korea. I was not in the battle. In fact, it turned out to be a fantastic honeymoon for the 2 of us.
So you practically did not participate in World War II as well as in Korean War. So that's a good fortune for you. Huh?
Yeah, those were the 2 wars, but I suffered through the horrors of what happened to many of my friends that graduated from high school that were killed in World War II. I suffered also because of the horrors of Vietnam and what happened over there. We lost 58,000 young men mainly. But this was called by 5 politicians, decided to send our kids to war in Korea or into Vietnam without justification. In that they decided that we should declare war against North Vietnam, and Lyndon Johnson claimed that they sunk one of our ships, which proved to be false, and that was not true, and yet he got Congress to declare war. So we sent millions of kids over there, rotated, and we lost 58,000 of them. And that just was one of the most tragic things that ever happened to the United States. And for the first time, we were defeated. And we were kicked out, if you wish, from Vietnam.
Okay, most of the peace activists and people which I have talked to in here in the United States see a Vietnam War losses in terms of the numbers of US soldiers killed. They don't see that many times more Vietnamese were killed, and they don't refer to those numbers.
I don't know. There must have been 1 million or more Vietnamese that we killed. But we killed many more in Cambodia and even the surrounding areas with our bombing. And a group of 5 politicians really made that happen.
Can you name those 5 politicians? You are referring to them time and again.
Well, I'm thinking of our president and some of the key people, the McNamara, who finally, decided to tell the truth of what happened there. So it was a group of small politicians. And that's been going on for hundreds of years, that politicians decide to send our kids to World War I. That should probably never have happened either, the way that really did. And World War II, now that was a little different. With Hitler, I saw no problem with that. We had to stop that, and join hands with the other nations and stop the horrors of killing the Jews and of murdering people. But even there, here we were, like Gary Davis, good friend of mine, pilot, flying over Germany, and he orders his bombardier to drop bombs and napalm on innocent people. Time after time, he bombed and bombed and bombed and killed many, and it finally got to him. And he said, I want to be a world citizen. And he was hit his plane was hit, and he limped into Sweden, and the Swedes thought it was a German made up like an American airplane, but he was then out of the war. But he declared himself a world citizen, and bless his heart for doing that, because it brought attention to the fact that we are really all world citizens, whether we like it or not. And he was ostensibly the first person to officially declare his citizenship of the world, not any country, and he turned his passport in. Now this is a fantastic story, making the point that we're all part of one big human family.
So can you explain a little more this word citizenship, because the audience may not be knowing about it?
World citizenship, the way we've defined it over the years, is that we look to the environment. I mean, the environment is number one. Here we've got global warming big time, and there's just no question about it, what the human family is doing to destroy the atmosphere the normal way with our pollution and with what we're doing. So environment is very important. The sense of being part of one big human family, regardless of our differences in race or color or creed or religion, just as this family of mine represents a big hunk of the human family in terms of race, color, creed, religion, etc., etc. And the friends that we've made, they understand that. You people, even though we have differences in color of skin and religion and so forth, we're part of that family. And we must find a way to join hands and insist that the United Nations be transformed into a governance body that will somehow, some way, be able to introduce the rule of law. And that's why our celebration of World Law Day on May 1st is so important. And I'm deeply honored to be part of that team of my wife Donna and I, and there you know, call it, and thanks to Dick Bernard and his team. It's a symposium honoring Donna and Lynn Elling as an annual event. And the second one was held this last May, and we're going to do it, I hope, every May 1st, whether I'm around or not. The idea is there, and it must be embellished to where we involve the whole human family, not just people here in Minnesota or the United States, but the entire spaceship Earth population. There are 7 billion of us passengers on that spaceship, and if we can't find a way to live in peace on that spaceship of ours, then we have a real problem. And I think the time is right. There's never been a better chance than right now, because the human family is ready to accept that concept. Does that help?
Yes, that does. So, two questions which arise from the replies you have made to me. Number one is, just out of curiosity, you referred to 5 politicians who sent their children to Vietnam War. So, just out of curiosity, was any of them killed during that war, or all of them returned safe and sound?
We had many friends that were in the Vietnam War. In fact, one of my son-in-laws was a pilot. Cindy's husband was a pilot in Vietnam, and he would come home, and when he came home would tell about the horrors of that war. He was not killed, but he was in the war. But I've known of many others that have had.
Could I interject? I think I'm also curious about the 5 politicians. I know Lyndon Johnson, and I think that's what Ehtasham is looking for.
You know, he was one of our wonderful governors, and he was Republican. But he said if there's one thing that we must all remember is the power and influence of the military-industrial complex, and he detested the Vietnam War, and he spoke out against that. So and Ernie Lindstrom and Don Fraser and all kinds of other people.
But I think probably we could finish this little piece that it was a limited number of people then and even today that make those kind of crucial decisions politically, and the Johnson and McNamara for sure, and in one way or another, Hubert Humphrey, we are at the Humphrey Fellow, was dragged into it as well, and I could probably even come up with some names if I thought about it. But I think it would probably be best just to move on from that.
So the other question is regarding your inspiration to work on the theme of peace for the rest of your life. So do you say or think that your experiences with World War II and then Korean War made you a peace activist?
They were two major parts of the problem, but my exposure, as everybody, all of us, have seen what has happened and what is going on, even today, where you have a group of small politicians that are deciding whether they capture and take away 300 young ladies. This is a group of politicians that are deciding to do that. The politicians that are deciding to put people in jail in Bangladesh for no good reason, where Miraz's father is involved in that. And this is all part of the whole scheme of things that's right here on the plate for us to see every day. We can witness it, and you turn the news on no matter what it is. And I happen to watch the news every night, 6 o'clock. It's devastating what is going on. Absolutely devastating that we're still putting up with that kind of treatment of people, where babies are being killed left and right in China just because they're female. And Jimmy Carter, who I happen to know quite well, he has a new book out about the horrors of how female babies are being murdered. And the claim, I think he said something like 200 million people, females, are killed each year. So it's the news that we see that's had that influence. So for sure, and then when I visited Hiroshima, Japan, that certainly was part of why I'm a peacenik. Anyone that goes through the Atom Bomb War Memorial Museum in Hiroshima will never be the same. And I urge everybody that has the chance to do that to see what it really is like for people to try to survive an atomic warfare. And here we're talking again about needing to beef up our atom bombs and our hydrogen bombs. That's stupid, and it's ridiculous. And I like to think, like Jimmy Carter said, if we could find every nation that's a member of the UN to cut back on their arms budget, even 1%, you could solve most of the human problems if the arms budget is reduced by the members of the United Nations family. So it's an ongoing thing.
That's pretty interesting. So have you been working on your financial, your profession? You talked about financial something. So did you continue, or you switched over to full-time peace activities?
Yes, I kept working as a very, very successful businessman, right on the level of the people that were totally against war, when many of my friends and even some of my neighbors would say, well, you know, he's a socialist for sure, and maybe even more so than, you know, so I was able to weather that differences and try to explain to them. But most of them, they would say, you know, they don't want to even listen. And I go to the Svenska Sällskapet among my friends there that are, many of them, very far right, and wonder, well, how can you be talking about world citizenship? That sounds like it's communist or it's socialist for sure. And I've had people, you know, I try to engage them in conversation, they walk away. And this is what's going on. We still have many, many people in this country, up at our lake place, Big Sandy Lake. I've been trying to get the school system up there to become a peace site. So I got the school board to listen to my story. I gave them a 10-minute pitch on why it's important to participate and have the school system a peace site and participate in the Nobel Peace Prize Festival. And I give my 10-minute pitch, they take a break, and I go up to the chairman, they're having a coffee break. I said, how we're doing? He said, not very well. I said, why? Because you talk about the United Nations. He said, if the United Nations is strengthened, they will invade us. I said, what? And I had a newspaper guy with me, and he said, what did you say? Well, he said they've got black helicopters, and they got this and that. This is just a few years ago. McGregor, Minnesota. They're changing their ways. I keep harping. Now they're sending kids to the Nobel Festival, and they're thinking seriously about becoming a peace site. It hasn't happened yet, but it's going to happen this summer.
And I see some of other places were declared as peace site by your efforts, Mall of America being one of them. What difference does it make when some place is declared a peace site?
All we ask, like my daughter's company, very successful business, they are a peace site. And if you look at the cards that we pass out, why we talk about the 5 basic positions of what a peace site is. And if you look at that, number 1 is environment. If they agree we need to talk about the environment, promote intercultural standing and understanding, seek peace within yourself, reach out to others, be responsible citizens of the world, and that's the essence of what we're talking about. And this is not set in cement. A business may vary. We're even talking about having the 3M company seriously become an international peace site. Now, if that happens, this would be incredible. And many other businesses that like the idea, the Habitat for Humanity, and on, many companies. And this interdependence project now is the way we ought to go. And if you don't know anything about that, I could tell you a bit about that brand new initiative.
So please speak about that.
Okay, back when we came back from visiting Hiroshima, we got Minneapolis to be declared a world citizen. And we got them to issue a declaration of world citizenship and even fly the UN flag with the US flag. And there's a long story beyond that of why some people now, even today, don't want the UN flag. Now, that's ridiculous. We then went on and got Minnesota to become declared an international state, a world state, the first of its kind on the state level. And we then had, that was adopted by Iowa and Illinois. They used the same language. But today we need a declaration of interdependence. And that is a magnificent concept that was conceived by a wonderful historian Henry Steele Comminger in 1976, 75, I'm sorry, and a beautiful document calling for a declaration of interdependence that would include the whole human family. And that's the way we need to go. But that was kiboshed also by the politicians that didn't like the idea of it because it talks about making the UN more effective and recognizing that all of the problems of human rights abuse need to be addressed. So I would, nevertheless, back in those days, I caught a copy of it, and I got all of our leadership, and I will share with you a copy of that declaration. In fact, it's available, right? I'll give that to you, where it calls for an endorsement. Minnesota is the North Star state. And by the way, I know a little bit about the North Star because I was a Navy navigator, and when you're out in the middle of the ocean and you want to know where you are, you got to have lines of position. And if you can get the North Star in your sextant, you know the not only the latitude, but you know all of the positions of the compass, you know your latitude and all of the positions. You only need one more line of position to know exactly where you are out in the ocean. So Minnesota is known as the North Star state, and we can show the way with this new project, and I think it can happen. If we're successful in promoting that concept of interdependence, we will have a chance, I think, to pull the politicians that have been calling the shots, but turning that whole process over to a reformed and strengthened United Nations.
That's very interesting. I have a long list of your achievements in front of me. Would you explain to us which ones of them are more significant?
Well, let me refresh my memory. This represents a very true picture, and I think the graduation from Washburn was certainly important to the Navy officer training. The marriage to Donna Moen was certainly a highlight. Eisenhower's declaration of May 1, very important. He declared that May 1st should be Law Day, and I decided, along with a few other people, that let's call it World Law Day. So that was important because we've been celebrating World Law Day for many, many years here in Minnesota and other places around the world because we started it here. The meetings with different people, I mentioned the Declaration of World Citizenship, Minneapolis and Minnesota, and then on down the line, the Minnesota Declaration of World Citizenship also was very controversial, and we had politicians that wanted to shoot that down, and it was unbelievable what the things that Wendy Anderson, the governor, and I went through, where people would have meetings saying that this is disloyal and that Hubert Humphrey is a communist. Anybody that signed that, they claimed were not loyal Americans. So all of those are important points. The peace site idea that I picked up in New Jersey that we started in 1957 has proven to be a very, very potent part of what and why we're going to be able to do what we're talking about, because all of the Minneapolis schools now are peace sites or are going to be peace sites according to the superintendent of schools. She has told me that this is high on the agenda for them to officially declare. Most of the schools in Bloomington are peace sites, and it includes many places of religion too, because we've got to reach out not only to schools but places of religion, whether they're churches or mosques or temples, makes no difference. We're all part of this one family. Certainly the meeting of Ruel and what he's been able to do at the Gandhi Mahal is unique. There's no other place I think, in the country that has done what he's been able to do as a businessman to promote this concept and to dedicate his beautiful community center as a world-class peace site. That's very, very important.
So Lynn, can I interrupt a minute? I'm going to try to make you do a forced choice of all of the things on that list, to name the single event that was most important to you in your evolution as a peace activist. Just one. If you could come up with one.
Okay, well, I'll tell you right off that when I took my son Todd to Vietnam and came home as a 92-year-old bird, and to go to an event that I didn't have any clue what they were going to do on May 1st at the Gandhi Mahal Cafe on World Law Day as a tribute to Donna and to me. This was a total surprise, and I would say that's number one.
Oh, I'll be darned. That's that last year, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's exactly the most important thing, because here we were able now to really talk about the need for world peace through world law, and it's got to happen. And I think that's where we've been able to introduce the Declaration of Interdependence. So that, picking the one event, I would say that's it.
Can I interpret for you what you and I have known each other for a few years now, and if I was going to interpret my question to you,
yeah,
what I would pick out from all the things you've ever told me, the number one would be Tarawa.
yes,
And number two would be Hiroshima, when you
Yeah.
first visited there, the memorial. I think
Yeah.
that was 53 or so. I think you went
yeah,
first.
right.
I'm putting words in your mouth.
Well,
I'm just-
I've tried to make that point,
Yeah.
that those were the two seeds of peace
Yeah.
that were planted in my mind. Tarawa and Hiroshima. Those two experiences planted seeds in my mind. And I'm a driving dynamo in terms of when I get an idea that makes sense, I'm going to go like hell with it. I don't care what the obstacles are, because to me it's the survival of the human family we're talking about. That we're not going to make it. I mean, we're not going to survive unless we find a way to join hands.
Okay, you have been a peace activist all throughout life. I'm interested to know what ways and methods you think worked for you in achieving your goals.
Well, I'm a marketer by background and experience in many, many years. I know how to sell. I know how to convince people to do things. And at the base of the triangle, you think of a triangle, is credentials is at the bottom of the triangle. And I have the credentials. So this, to me, all of us have our own credentials, but you may want to latch on to a few more as you try to tell this story to others. And you can borrow my story if it'll help. And it might. So you need credentials. And then you need to disturb people. And I don't know how more possible it is to disturb the human family, most of whom aren't represented by anybody. How do we disturb them? You don't need to disturb them. They're ready to revolt. They're ready over there in your country and all around. There are millions of people that are revolting today because they're being abused. And so we don't need to disturb them. But we got to disturb the politicians that represent us at the United Nations and in our state and in the UU government. We've got to disturb the key people there. We've got to convince China and Russia to quit beating the war drums. And we've got to convince them. And we're not going to do it because the United States says so. And I was interested in today's paper saying that the Germans now are working with the Russians and others to see if they can defuse that horrible situation in the Ukraine. But Putin is a criminal, my view. He should be brought before the Hall of Justice in The Hague and tried. Now that's not going to happen, and it won't happen, but ideally people that violate international law should be tried. And that's what this new system that Joe Schwartzberg is talking about, that we have a pathway to do it. Now, if I'm giving you, you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yes. You just referred to Putin as a war criminal, and you said that he should be tried for that as well. Many persons here in the United States and the world over think that the junior Bush is a war criminal as well, and he should be tried as well. So what do you think about that?
I think that Bush violated international law also. But he's not alone among our presidents. We've had a lot of presidents that violated international law in the guise of saying they need the Monroe Doctrine or they need this doctrine or that. Even Teddy Roosevelt was a real pushy guy and using his, and all of our presidents have done that. Reagan, for sure, used the power of the United States. We're spending more money on our arms race, or on our armaments, than the next 15 countries.
But unfortunately, none of them is living anymore except George Bush. And we have seen his international war criminals in recent history, in recent past. So, again, coming to the same question, how should we go about George Bush? Shouldn't we prosecute him as well, or we should try to prosecute him on war charges of war criminals?
I think we can't certainly go around calling them war criminals. That won't work. We've got to massage the whole process and go through people that do support us, like the Secretary General of the United Nations, who I happen to know. And he was a table mate of ours in Oslo, Norway. Kim Moon is very supportive of what we're talking about. And so we've got to build on people here in Minnesota. We have many top-notch, very capable and respected people, like our governor, very supportive of what we're talking about. And we have people like Ernie Lindstrom and Don Fraser and Bill Frenzel, who's a Republican, who we need to build the credentials in trying to convince the others to bring this before the United Nations as a possibility. And my guess is that if we do it right by May 1st of next year, I'm hoping that the UN will seriously take a look at the possibility of having a declaration of interdependence sponsored by the United Nations. Now that's a long shot, but I think it's possible.
That's great. So we have talked about your successes, your achievements. We are also interested to find out about your failures.
What to what?
Your failures.
My what?
Failures. Fail.
You didn't succeed. The aims, the objectives in which you did not succeed at all.
Well, I think we're making great success. I believe that the success we've had at Gandhi Mahal is an example of what could happen at the Innovation Center of 3M. Let's say the 3M people decide that this is something we should have a full conference and involve the Stanley Foundation of Muscatine, Iowa. Get the big corporations can make a tremendous difference because they have the wherewithal in terms of finance to support such revolutionary, and that you wouldn't use that name if you're trying to sell it. But the truth is that they're ready, I believe, to accept the idea that we really are part of one big human family, and we've got to promote that notion of traveling on a spaceship. So the process of convincing and moving in this direction successfully needs to be carefully managed through the children. Don't forget, from the very beginning I've tried to make the point that if we don't use the children and the young people, like Miraz and all the others that represent that college-age group, we're kidding ourselves. But they have the ability to reach millions of people in their social network connections and so forth. So that is going to happen if they do a good job of promoting this concept through schools, places of worship around the world, not just here in Minnesota, but in the United States, in the European Union, and then much broader around to all the other countries of the world.
If I might interject, I'm uncomfortable interjecting, but I feel the need to interject. I don't think in Lynn Elling's vocabulary the word failure exists. I believe that, Lynn, that if you acknowledge failure, you have given up. and in all the years that I've known him, that's not part of Lynn's vocabulary. Failure.
Yeah. That's interesting.
I admit I'm guilty, and it is true. It's very. I think it should be unacceptable to anybody that you give up. You never give up. You just never. Look at what Mandela did. My God, he spent 27 years in prison, and when he gets out of prison, what does he do? He reaches out to his worst enemies, the people that threw him in jail even. He reached out, and he had that hope, and he had that vision that he could be successful. Even everybody would bet that he could never do what he did. How did he do it? Because he believed in this concept. He believed that there was that driving dream that would someday come alive. And what a magnificent human being he was. And I like to turn to him as one of the examples of what we need to do, no matter what the odds are.
So I can see his book Long Walk to Freedom there, and his movie on his life Invictus here. So I understand he's a big inspiration for you.
Yes, and his spirit lives on, just like Donna's spirit, So
that's interesting to know. Okay, so you don't have any regret in your life. Can I say that?
I really can't think of anything that's been totally devastated. I've had many disappointments. People that, and particularly if you're a good salesperson, you know that 3 people out of 4 are going to turn you down. They're going to say, no, I don't want to give you an appointment. And at least 3 people are going to turn you down when you come to selling, when you're trying to convince them of this idea. But you don't quit, because 3 out of 4 turn you down. No, you keep going.
Lynn, what do you see, foresee the future of peace organizations here in Minnesota?
I think it's all on the ups. It's very positive. Now, our World Citizen outfit needs some help here and there, but I'm very hopeful that they will hang in there also, and that they will be able to be one of the major players groups. But my opinion is that Minnesota truly is going to show the way. And they're going to show the way through what we're already doing in the process. The school systems, the people of worship from my church, the First Universalist Church, from Dick's church, the Basilica of St. Mary, and I'm hoping that many mosques and shrines and Buddhist groups, the Muslim community, should join hands with us. There should be no conflict in the fact that we desperately need to have a peaceful, healthy world for our children and our grandchildren. I don't want my kids, my grandchildren, and we've got a few that are, very small. And I look them in the eye and I'm promising them that I'm going to do what I can till the last breath I got to promote this peaceful, healthy world. So I'm very optimistic.
But then we see so many individuals and organizations in the US working on the theme of peace, but there is no meaningful impact made on US policies and acts.
Well, but that's going to change. See, this is, it's around the corner. You can't see it maybe right now, but you may be very surprised what happens a year from now. And maybe it won't, but it's going to move in that direction, whether I'm around or not, because we got people like Dick and many others that have this same driving dream. And we've got some marvelous people that just feel so strongly about this.
So coming to my last question, what message would you like to give to public in general and youth in particular?
Please reach out to your neighbors. Start with your family. Be sure that your family members know where you stand and what you stand for. But reach out to your neighbors. Every one of my neighbors here knows my story, believe me. And they say, well, here's the old man again. But the truth is that many of them have become dear friends too. But reach out to your neighbors. Reach out to your schools. Every school in this neighborhood is a peace site. Why? Because and others believe that's the way that we ought to go. Most of the churches in this South Minneapolis area have either heard the story or are thinking about it. Many of the businesses, it's schools, it's churches, places of worship, and businesses and other organizations like the Habitat for Humanity, reaching millions of people, not only here in the United States, but all around the world. And Jimmy Carter is one of the leaders of that. So my advice is, step up to the plate. It's your turn to be at the batters, to hit the ball, and reach out to family, to friends, neighbors, schools, and places of worship. Convince them that we've all got to work together on this project for an interdependence world to provide peace for our kids.
Could I ask a final question?
Yes, you can put it in.
I'd like to ask Lynn, because it's interesting to me. In 1994, the Mall of America became a peace site, and for this video, I think it would be interesting for posterity to describe the process that you followed back then to have the Mall of America become a peace site, because this is a very major business institution, and it would be almost looked on as impossible to do today. But How did you go about getting the Mall of America to become a peace site?
It wasn't hard at all, and it's crazy because we were so strong in terms of peace site schools in the Bloomington area and in Minneapolis. We were able to pull together a team of people that approached the leadership at the Mall of America. At that time, Harold Stassen was a good friend. He had a lot of influence. And so we were able to pull together a team to approach them and get the Mall of America to become a peace site. And John Anderson was, the first time we dedicated it, John Anderson was the keynote speaker. And these gentlemen don't know who he was, but he became quite a famous guy representing the independents group, and not the Republicans, not the Democrats, but he was an independent and ran for president and was very well known. I read about him just the other day, about he's still living.
He was quite successful.
Yes.
Really. Yeah.
But today, take a look at today. On Friday, May 5th, I was invited out to the Bloomington schools to present my story. The mayor of Bloomington was right there wondering every year. We've done that for 11 years. And I gave my little spiel, and the mayor then took me aside afterward. He said, Lynn, the Mall of America people want to visit with us. They are ready to rededicate. So I'm telling you that this could happen very soon if we were able to rededicate the Mall of America on United Nations Day this year. It is very possible. And it's going to happen because I keep telling my story and I tell it to the right people. And the mayor, people couldn't believe it. They heard Flora was standing right there when this happened. And she's elated. Flora is a wonderful member in the Generalissimo of that program. But to answer your question, it's not only what happened when we first did it, but it's what's going to happen maybe this year.
And Lynn, have you ever tried or thought of trying a career in politics?
Did I what?
Tried or thought of trying a career in politics?
We're dealing with politicians all the time, and we're hoping that all of them will treat this, regardless of what their particular political bent is. And there are so many people, not only in our country, that have that one idea that they're going to make their politics for everybody, and they don't give a damn about how they get there. And this is not the kind of politician that's going to listen to my story, and I stay clear of them. I talk to them, I'm trying to be friendly, but I'm talking to people that are open-minded, that are willing to listen to the other approach to things.
But that is a place where you can make a real difference. So why have you not ever thought of getting into politics and trying to achieve your objectives from there?
I agree with Max Stanley, who you don't know. But Max Stanley was a very successful businessman from Muscatine, Iowa, an engineer who went on to become very famous, not only by the size of his business, but his influence. And he started the Stanley Foundation. And he was asked that same question many times. And he looks the person in the eye. I can be far more successful by not going into politics. They wanted him to run for governor. They wanted him of Iowa. They wanted him to, he said no. They wanted him to be a senator. No. He said, I want to stay as an independent, and I want to be able to deal with everybody without a political agenda that I've got to follow. So that's my answer too. I would refuse if somebody said I should run for this or run for that.
That's interesting. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.